Materializing metaphysical money. Materializing metaphysical money. You're listening to Wisdom Top Mentor Interviews, presented by Hakeem Alibokis Alexander on Spreaker, Social Podcasting, and Wisdom, Social Audio Inc. Presented for Wisdom Top Mentor Interviews in association with Uniquilibrium. I was just on a great show with a fellow wisdomer, Andrea Raquel. The subject wasn't about manifesting money, although it was brought up in relation to privilege. She's on TikTok right now. I don't have TikTok downloaded on any of my devices, or else I'd have followed over there and jumped up on the stage. But I got to follow up with something that I started yesterday. And what that was is the term occultonometry, which I've then mutated into occultonometrics and various permutations of it. I've been Katya. I gotta shout this out. Katya Davidova, she on LinkedIn, she posted, by the way, if you don't know who she is, she's the author of the book Joy in Plain Sight. A lovely young lady who impresses me with so many of her pursuits. But on LinkedIn, she has a photo of her. She made a post that says, "Want some tasty mind snacks? Does growth and development jazz you up? Me too." And so she's promoting something. Join hundreds of readers in a newsletter focused on development of the personal, professional, leadership, and organizational flavors. My hope is to provide you with value, tools plus micro experiments, and connection, vulnerability plus behind the scenes. But on that post, she has a photo of her holding up a sticky note, a yellow sticky note that says, "You are limitless." And so then I put a post 5 hours ago that says, "You certainly are limitless." And her response to me is just, it's awesome. I love it when I get messages from Katya, because she's always so awesome. She's an authentic person. I know that word gets overused a lot, but her response is, "Says the master of limitless pursuit himself, Hakeem, and thank you." So she's fantastic. I do hope that I get to meet her someday soon. She's very fantastic. I have a big professional, and I just, let me just stop being stupid. I have a crush on her because she's fantastic. Like, some people you don't meet. I mean, I've spoken to her on the phone several times, but I mean, she's just so awesome. She's just one of those people. She's like she reminds me of like how you develop a crush on a celebrity, but I think it's like a meritocratic. What is it? Would that be the correct word? It's a crush based on her merits as a person, but she's also a beautiful woman. I mean, let's face it, if you see Katya Davidova, she's gorgeous. But also, in a meritocracy, she would be at the top of the list of the people with amazing merit. So, continuing, materializing metaphysical money here on Wisdom Top Mentor Interviews on Spreaker, Social Podcasting, and Wisdom, Social Audio Inc. I'm going to tell this story, and then I'm going to go manifest some more money myself. This is a subject that a lot of people really want to tap into themselves. And this is not some testament of me saying that I'm rich or anything like that. There's still a lot of things that I have to take care of financially, and everything I have to do in a certain order. And I have to do things in a certain order so that I can continue to thrive. For example, my friend Rene Cabrera, he loaned me some money that I still have to pay him back to help me get back to the United States. And I have to pay him back. I already paid back another guy named Rene Moran, who's an actor in California. I had to pay him back about $1,400, which I did. But there are so many things that are possible here. So this is not something where, like, you'll hear a lot of people talking about how they're rich and they're in mansions and all this other nonsense like that. No, it's a way to find the path of least resistance to getting the money that is owed to you from your service, and from your, not only from your service, but also from your the products and anything that you provide. Like, it's mutual exchange. Welcome, Dr. Rao. Hello, Amir Ali. And this is so actually what I mean is materializing. Material means that it's in the physical, right? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about bringing the desires you have for physical money, right, into actual money that you can touch, that you can use, right, that you can put into use so that you can live your daily life with it. That's what I'm talking about. That's what manifesting metaphysical money is. It's actually, I'm talking about a real practice. I'm talking about something you can actually do that's simple. Just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy. Okay, so this, if you think that you're here to hear me talk about not doing any kind of hard work at all, you are mistaken, and you should go somewhere else. Because I'll tell you right now that one of the things I did, and I do like to brag about this, and it's because I have the physical capability to do so, and not a lot of people do. But in order for me to make ends meet when I came out to California, not to California, when I came from California to Virginia, and the first day I landed there, after I got back from being in China in 5 years and losing my wife and all this other stuff like that, I started riding my bike 20 miles in one direction to get to a security job that would pay me $12 an hour for 5 hours a night. That was $60. And I did that because I could, but also because I had the determination and the resilience to do so. So I worked hard. Not only did I ride my bike 20 miles there, but then I worked for 5 hours and then I rode 20 miles back. And then before that, that was while I was also working as a personal trainer, struggling, I might add, at a place called One Life Fitness Red Mill, which I then eventually quit and opened up my own gym. And then I also left the job at the Green Parrot that I was riding 20 miles to, not because I quit, but because the kitchen caught on fire. But very soon after that, I was given an opportunity to work at a place called Central 111 for Billy Hudson, who put me in a payroll, who one day said to me, "I don't like a lot of people, but I like you." Billy is a hoot, man. That guy's pretty gangster. But there is a way that you align your mindset that causes not only your brain, maybe you can call it the reticular activating system in neurology, which is, for example, I recently got a car in March, and the car is red. It's a red Toyota, and it's got aftermarket wheels that are black. And I never noticed that before. Even one of the DJs, DJ Rico Fulatino, who will be spinning tomorrow night at Central 111, has a black truck with black wheels. But I never noticed anything like that before, or maybe I even thought it was stupid or ignored it. But when I got the car, then I started noticing all kinds of vehicles that were red with black wheels. Now, maybe you've seen it before. Maybe you've seen a lot of black wheels on cars with aftermarket wheels. But that's what the reticular activating system does neurologically. It's when it helps you to recognize things like ownership and possessions and stuff like that, and familiarity. So that the same thing happened many years ago when I bought a brand new 2017 Hyundai Elantra, which is a badass car, by the way. I started seeing all kinds of other Hyundai Elantras with that color, electric blue, where I didn't notice them before. So when you set up certain things in your mind, you can call it psychological, but psychologists don't even understand the psychology. Many people don't even understand the word psych that forms the word psychology, and psychiatry means soul. Psychiatry should actually mean doctoring the soul, and psychology should be study of the soul. But that's another story for another day, perhaps, as they say. But there is a way that you can set up your thinking patterns so that you not only see opportunities before you, but you have the wherewithal to act upon them. And not only just act upon them, but act upon them in a way that produces the best results, the most favorable results to you. And sometimes, yes, it seems like money gets attracted to you like magic. The opportunities that present themselves to you seem like they're unfair. Like, how am I getting this opportunity when there are so many other people who are struggling? I mean, there are people all over the place who are complaining about getting jobs, and jobs are being thrown at me. People are asking me to take their money. They want me to work with them or for them or to hire me. To the point where I have a waiting list for clients for clinical hypnosis. I have a waiting list for people to do divination with, well, cultinometry, as I call it, using numerology, using tarot, for example, and the Viking runes. And it's not because there's a whole lot of them, really. It's because I manage my time somewhat well, I think. I can't just take on all comers all the time. And so let me get into this. I wanted to wait just a few moments and build this up. Welcome, Sonia. Hello, Ali. Dow with the dashes. Nisha, Dr. Rao, Amir, Ali, whether you are still here in the room with us or just passing through, I welcome you. So here is how somebody else just popped in here. Hello, Christopher Birkenbein. Welcome. Christopher will get a kick out of this because Christopher is a scientist. You guys just keep popping in here. Hello, Alyssa. Christopher Birkenbein, if you guys don't know him, last time I looked at his profile, he became a Wisdomer after me. This dude has like 8.8 thousand followers on Wisdom. You guys pretend to love scientists so much. Why don't you guys study a little bit of science then, guys? What the heck? You guys jump to follow Chris, and then you guys scoff at science. And speak of the man. Welcome, Chris. How are you, sir?
I had to jump on since you gave me such a warm welcome. That has astounded me. Never expected that. Like, I'm not a full-time Wisdom user. Like, I've got some talks, but I answer a lot of questions. And, like, every day I jump on my profile and I look at that. I'm like, holy crap. Like, are these real people? Is there a bot that's just following me?
Right.
But, it's nice. It makes you feel validated. And the stuff that you're doing is resonating with people. And that's really the point, right?
Definitely.
It's not about right or wrong. It's not about good or bad. It's about just making connections.
Sure, certainly.
So I'm really happy. But I'm here for the metaphysical money, man. How do I get that?
Yes, sir. This is very interesting. So I'll tell you a story, and you got to tell me about this because this is ridiculous. And look, so the number 8 people are in the room, right? And you happen to have 8.8 thousand followers. So this story is even better right now because you jumped up on here, and because of that, because Christopher, as a person who uses math sometimes in your work, right? Statistically and probabilistically, when I tell this story, you're going to have to tell me how likely something like this is to happen, because this is ridiculous. Okay. So now I'm using numerology, right? Which a lot of people, and you maybe even you will say is a pseudoscience, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I will agree. I will say that's a pseudoscience.
I love Chris. Chris, he won't come up here and be like, "Nah, Hakeem, I believe." He'll tell me like it is. All right. So, but this is what happened. So I got a book called Numerology for Beginners by a woman named Jerry Bauer. And I got it because I'm just always looking and searching, and I graduated from a school of clinical hypnosis. And my girlfriend at the time, she had worked at the school, but I broke up with her because of a stupid argument. I shouldn't have done that, but I did. I overreacted. But anyway, I got this book, and when I got the book, I was looking in it, and in numerology, one of the things you do is you add up alphanumerically based on how the letters of the alphabet are arranged in chronological order in the alphabet. So A is 1, B is 2, right. C is 3, and then of course every number, just like in astrology, another pseudoscience, would have different characteristics attributed to each sign, right? Each number has one, or each numeral, because technically, you know, numerals are the written symbol for it, where a number is the actual quantity. But I'm going to use the word number and numeral interchangeably. I'm just going to use them for the same thing, just not to confuse people.
Fair enough.
But and I looked back in time at this incident because I only noticed the significance of it to me when I thought about it before. So I got this book, and when I did the numbers for me and this girl that I broke up with, there was only one place in the book where the word hypnosis was mentioned, and it was when I combined our names together. Mine is a 9, hers came out to a 7, and so together 9 and 7 is 16, and in numerology you reduce everything to a single digit, and 1 and 6 is 7 again. So together our vibration was a 7, and in the book it said that together you will both be interested in occult subjects like astrology, numerology, hypnosis, and the like. And it was the only place in the book in which hypnosis was mentioned. And I looked in the index, and I actually went through the book and read it word for word to see if I could find it anywhere else, and it wasn't. It was only there with that pairing of people. Right. And I thought, this is significant to me because of the fact that was there. So it made me continue to read the book for another 4 hours and then buy it. So then sometime later, I worked at a place called Meridian's Bodies in Motion as a group fitness trainer. And I was making $25 an hour there, which I learned was actually kind of low for California, because I learned that some other guys were making $45 an hour. So I went to Shireen Paulson, the group fitness director, and I said, hey, Shireen, I'd like to get a raise. And she said, how much? And I said, well, I'm making 25. I want 45. And she didn't say anything except for, I'll see what I can do. Now, the reason why I went to ask her this is because in the book Numerology for Beginners, it says that the number 8 is the number of power, money, and fame. And that when you have a personal 8 year or a personal 8 month or a personal 8 day, because you can calculate to get the numerals for each one of those, that's a good favorable time to ask for a raise, start a business, so on and so forth, things having to do with money. And so this happened to be a personal 8 day for me. That's all I knew at the time. And so the way that it works is that my birthday is September 17th, and the last year that I had my birthday at that time was 2006. So 9 plus 17 is 26, 2 and 6 is 8. And then the year 2006 is also 2 and 6, which is an 8. I didn't even know this stuff until looking back at it, but I thought that was significant. There's 2 8s there, but 8 and 8 is 16. All right, and then 1 and 6 is 7. So I was in a personal 7 year. That's how you get your personal year, is you use your birthday and the last year that you had your birthday, and you add all those numbers up, use commutative law of addition, you add them all up, doesn't matter what order, and then you reduce it down to a single digit. So now I'm in a 7 year, but then the month of August is 8, the 8th month, so I add 7 plus 8 to get my personal month. So 7 plus 8, of course, is 15, 1 and 5 is 6. So that meant that if I wanted to land on an 8 at any time, the chances of me getting an 8 month would be, I'd have to wait 2 months. But I could get an 8 day every 9 days. So on the 2nd and the 11th were 8 days, because now I'm in a 6 month, right? So I just had to either get 2, 11, or the 20th, or even the 29th, and I would have landed on an 8 day, because I would get a 2 out of those to add to that 6. So on the 11th, I asked her for that. This is when I asked her for that raise, and she said, I'll see what I can do. Now, some time passed. I didn't even think about it anymore, and I didn't even think about the fact that my birthday the next month put me into a numeral 8 year. Again, September 17th, 9 plus 17, 2 and 6 is 8. Right, plus 2 and 7 for 2007 is a 9. 9 and 8 is 17. 1 and 7 is 8. So now I'm in a personal 8 year, right? Now, fast forward, I told you I forgot about this. Now, I forgot about asking her because I didn't see I kept on looking, but there was no raise on my check. Now I go, my friend Christine, who was my girlfriend at the time, it was her birthday is January 7th. And so I remember very clearly that I was hanging out with her on her birthday. And so I didn't go to pick up my check, because at this place, Meridian's Bodies in Motion, we picked up our checks on the 7th and the 22nd. Yes, I know, archaic. A check? Who picks that up? Well, don't people get direct deposit these days? Yes, but at the time I wasn't, in 2007. And now it's 2008, though. And so fast forward, we're in 2008 again now. And so I go the next day on the 8th of January in 2008 to go pick up my check. Which, again, my friend Christine's birthday is 1 and 7, so that's another 8 right there. But it also happened to be, in retrospect, when I look back at the numbers, it happened to be a numeral 8 day. And to demonstrate this just again, so you see how it works, my birthday, September 17th, 9 and 17 is 26, 2 and 6 is 8. Now, it's the month of January. right? So now I add, because I had my last birthday in 2007, so I'm in an 8 year. January is the first month, so 8 plus 1 is 9, and then I go there on January 8th, so 9 plus 8 once again is 17, 1 and 7 is 8. Okay, so all these 8s are popping up. But now I go get my check, and I open it up, and I don't get $20 raise. I don't get even a $15 raise or a $10 raise. Chris, because I've been saying this, can you guess how much I got as a raise?
Obviously $7.56, am I right?
See, Chris claims to be a scientist, but he is a comedian. This guy.
Let's go with 8.
This guy. Yes, it was $8. So I didn't realize at the time. It was only when I looked back using numerology that all these 8s popped up. It's 2008. My friend's birthday added up to an 8. It's a personal 8th day for me. It was in an 8 year for me. I asked in the 8th month of the year on an 8th day. My birthday and the year 2006 added up to 8. So this is what I'm talking about, and I did get the raise. So I accomplished what I asked for, but not only that, all these 8s popped up everywhere. So that's why I talk about, why I put this materializing metaphysical money, because several times over and over again when I've used this, when I've done things in this vein, and also a few stories I was going to tell here, these things keep on happening, and they keep popping up over and over and over again with numbers, and it seems as if signs are being sent to me and things like that. So now, with all of those 8s there popping up like that, and the fact that I got an $8 raise, and that's not what I asked for, and that's a very peculiar number to get, do you think that there's something to that?
No. And I'll tell you why.
Please, I want to know.
Numerology actually has quite a bit of research behind it. And numerology persists because of a combination of very powerful biases and misinformation that persist. So the very first one is called false complexity. Okay, so false complexity. How many numbers are there in the world?
Well, I mean, really,
right?
Numerology.
There is a number. It's infinite. It goes forever.
Right.
So what are the chances of all these numbers adding up? It just sounds astronomical. How can all these numbers add up? But when you think about it, there are actually only 10 digits that we use to represent numbers.
Well, numerology,
and since you can't add any two positive integers together to get 0, there's actually only 9.
Well, you know,
9,
exactly right. Numerology only uses 9. Yeah.
So now you only have 9 numbers. But when you think about it, you're adding numbers. So the probability of ending up with a number that equals 6, for instance, is much higher than the probability of any two numbers adding up to 9. So let's take the number 8.
Yeah.
You have the number 8 by itself, 8 and 0, and you have 7 and 1, and you have 6 and 2. So now 3 combinations of numbers will add up to 8. 3 out of 9 numbers, combinations, and as you add the number of digits you're adding together, that goes up. So you actually end up somewhere between like a 30 and 35% of any amount of number combinations that you can get will add up to the number 8, which is why in numerology, the numbers that are special that you see to come up will always be 6, sign of the devil, 7, lucky number 7, and 8, because those are statistically the most likely number that you will ever get when you start adding up numbers. So that's the first part, false complexity. The second part is confirmation bias. I know you're familiar with that.
Yes, sir.
Every time this happens and you recognize it, it now solidifies your idea that this is a thing that exists, that happens, and that is meaningful.
Now,
right?
I want to
So
let you know
I don't
something,
think
Chris.
we need to go into any more detail on that.
I want to let you know something. I do often mention confirmation bias when I am doing numerology. I do very often recognize that as part of what I'm doing. And I also recognize, and I mentioned earlier about the reticular activating system and how we start to recognize things that are familiar to us. But yes, so I'm familiar with that.
Yes. Now, the other side, the third part of this that works together with this is called hindsight bias, right? So now, every time in your past where something is kind of similar to confirmation bias, except for it's a little bit different because you're looking at things in the past, and you're assigning importance to things that you can find that match whatever it is that's already happened. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you were to take the number 6, and for the next month, I'm going to tell you that 6 is your number. 6 is important, right? So what will start happening is you will start paying attention to the number of 6, and everything that results in the number of 6 is going to have more of a manifest power in your mind than numbers that add up to something else. You will almost subconsciously be doing this. You'll be adding numbers and you'll find stuff that does not add up to the number 6, and it will go away, and you won't actually make the effort to think about them. But every time something does add up to 6, it will stick, because that's your special number. That's the one that needs something.
Yeah.
And in this particular case of this story that you're talking about, you came into this knowing that the number 8 was your number. This was your 8th month. This was your, all of those things that added up.
Well,
and so
I didn't know that at the time.
When people know these things,
I knew it in hindsight.
Go ahead.
I knew it in hindsight.
Yeah.
When I look back. Okay.
And so this is true with astrology too. When you know that your planets are in alignment and this is a good day, and you believe in that stuff, you are more likely to try things that you would not be likely to try at any other point.
Now, I'll agree with that.
So just because you're more likely to try it, you are more likely to be successful.
Now, I'll agree with that.
And when you are successful, you remember it, and it solidifies your idea that this thing is true. And when you are not successful, well, guess what? It doesn't matter if you're a follower of astrology, religion, or any other sort of belief system. There's always a reason why it didn't work out that doesn't conflict with your belief.
Now,
in religion or like Christianity, right? Yeah. When you do something and something good happens, praise God. God planned it that way. That was the thing that did it. It was God. But when something negative happens, it's either God has a plan or, the devil is whatever people, whatever it is, whatever belief system you have set in place these rules that will confirm your beliefs when it's positive and allow you to successfully debuff the false things that would otherwise prove you wrong, because it falls under this other thing that takes care of that, or you just simply don't remember it. So those are the 3 things that allow numerology to propagate still today.
Now, to your last point, I'll agree with that, because I also wrote a paper on this about how different things in confirmation bias and how the numbers add up. But I specifically related it to hypnosis or the mind, like how, for example, you're more like point, you're more likely to do things. And so this is one of the things that I tell people about when I'm teaching numerology, is that it's, even when I talk about the angel numbers, I talk about it's really a way to get inspiration. Just like how people read the Bible, you're more likely to do things when you believe. So I wouldn't have asked her for a raise if I didn't believe that I was going to get it. Like if I didn't ask her, then there was no chance that I'm going to get it, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So it's in this that I encourage in numerology. Now, there are a lot of people who won't believe anything you say, and even me to a certain point. There, in my life experience, I have a lot of things that, to me, add up so much that I'm like, yeah, I hear what Chris is saying, and I understand what he's saying, and I'm going to go and say, however, I still believe that there's something to these numbers in the universe and how they pop up. And
Sure.
I want to continue, and I want your commentary on these other 2 short stories,
okay,
if you will. So,
absolutely.
So then I was going to continue with this. So this is how I was going to convince people, if you will, that they should use this numerology system to enhance their life and to make better changes in their life. So something that happened one day, I work at a place called Central 111, and I was sitting in my car with my friend Sarah. And one of the bartenders, Brian, walks out. And when he walks out, all of the lights in the entire shopping center, the Renaissance Shopping Center, blink out for a moment and come back on. And when they do, the time 111 was on the clock. And so he's standing out there looking in awe, standing under a sign that says 111, and it's 111 on the clock. And the 111 in the angel numbers book says that take a screenshot of your life, because all of your thoughts, goals, dreams, and everything like that are going to be replicated in the future. So get on a high vibration now. So I thought that was significant. But then a few weeks later, I was driving for Uber, and I left my wallet at a gas station. And for 5 hours, I'm driving around until I realized it was gone. And I go back. I'm on Wisdom here with another Sarita Isa, she goes by here. And we're talking, and I get in my car after I recover my wallet, for somehow it was still there with my debit card on top of it, completely untouched. And when I close the door into the car, it's 2:22. And in the Angel's Numbers book, it says, you are in the right place at the right time. Take a moment and look around and enjoy your surroundings. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. And then the next day, I'm at the club, Central 111, and I want to introduce my girlfriend to another friend, Shayla, that's there. And Shayla asked where I met my girlfriend and what was our first date. And I told her, and I love books and all this other stuff like that. She says, oh, what was the last book you read? And I told her the Angel Numbers book by Mystic Mihaela. She says, Angel Numbers, and she pulls up her sleeve and she has 222 tattooed on her arm. So, looking at something like that, these things to me are what would be known as meaningful coincidences, these synchronicities, these things that seem to rival comprehension. And so I was telling this story to two writers who I picked up from GameStop, and we're talking about Assassin's Creed, and they told me how it's related to Homer's Iliad and what's the other one? The Odyssey, and how they kind of mapped the assassins in history. Yeah. They try to put them into history, and it reminded me of Carmen Sandiego. Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego? And then we started talking about numbers, and so I tell them the story about the 222, and the next day it's showing up on that girl having a tattoo on her arm. And then while I'm telling the story, one of the guys goes, "Hey, it's 222 right now." And this also happened when I was telling the story, when I was picking up my ID card, the Defense Biometric Identification System from Langley Air Force Base, which thankfully you're going to be there in August. So I get to meet you.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
And at the same time, when I was telling that story on another app called Call-In, it was 111 when I was telling the story about 111. So things like that are what kind of baffle me sometimes. So what do you think? What's your commentary on that?
So let me start off with saying, first of all, humans are so incredibly good at finding patterns. We are so good at finding patterns that we find patterns when there are patterns. So think of it this way. So if you look at like random number generation, if you know anything about computer science or mathematics, you know that a truly random number generator is impossible. You have to have some algorithm, something that you're based off of. The best that we can do is have random number generators that are actually based off of the frequency found in looking at the background radiation of space. That is the closest we can get to a truly random number generator.
Now, isn't that,
and when you take
Arno Penzias was the guy who discovered that?
That sounds right, yes. Yeah. So when you would take numbers that were generated just coming off of the background radiation from space, right? People would see patterns in this. They're like, oh yeah, here's the pattern. And they would tell you the pattern, but that pattern doesn't actually exist. And so that is the strongest thing that humans have when they start looking at things. And it goes for numerology, it goes for astrology, it even goes for a lot of the conspiracy theorists. So I'll ask you this question.
Yes, sir.
How many times do you look at a clock or a watch or your phone to see the time during a day?
Numerous. It's uncountable times.
You couldn't even count it, right? When's the last time you remember it being 1:27 p.m.? I'm going to take your silence as not easily rememberable, right? How about 5:43 p.m.?
That one I do notice. Earlier today.
Okay. Yeah. Was there something that happened, or is it because it's a pattern of 543?
It's a pattern of 543.
Okay. The most recognizable pattern on a clock or any numbers is when all of the numbers repeat and we remember it. We don't remember most any other things unless it's some sort of pattern.
Because I noticed 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6. Those numbers, or if it's reversed, like 543, like you said.
Sequential patterns are the second most memorable thing. Not everybody recognizes it unless your brain just works on that frequency, right? Your numbers. Not everybody does that, but everybody recognizes the repeated numbers: 222, 111, 333, whatever it is. So anything that's happening when you look at the clock and you see that, you're going to remember, and there's going to be false importance placed on it. Now, how many times do you look at your clock where it says a repeated number during a day and nothing has happened? I guarantee you can't remember. But what you do remember is when there's a repeated pattern and there is something significant happening, that you remember and you assign significance to it. And when you think back on all your memories, you don't remember all the times that you looked at your clock where there wasn't a pattern. You don't remember what time it was when significant things happened, if there wasn't something right in front of you showing you what time it is. But what you absolutely do remember is two interesting things that happened at the same time. A repeating number on your clock and something significant in your life. So is it a coincidence? And what you named it is exactly right. It is, I can't remember what an important or whatever.
Yes, meaningful coincidence. Meaningful coincidence.
And that is scientifically correct, because a coincidence is just that. It's meaningful because you have assigned meaning to it, not because it was meaningful on its own, intrinsically.
Now, this is the power that I assign mostly to numerology and things like this, because I'm very familiar with the power of inspiration. So, a lot of people get all rah-rah and excited when they go to like personal development talks or motivational speeches and things like that, and it gets them fired up to do things. Just like how you mentioned earlier when, I assigned it to my personal experience that I may not have asked for that raise if I didn't think that there was a better chance of me getting it. And I probably presented myself better with more confidence because in my mind I thought so, that I was going to get the raise because of this number. And so this is where my walking the middle path kind of comes in, is where I am familiar with these different things. And so I also understand that they have a large effect on what happens when we do these things. And so that's why I believe that it's also important, because in my opinion, in my experience, people need inspiration. People need motivation from wherever they can get it, whether it's encouragement from their parents or friends or other significant others or anything like that. And so that is the middle path that I walk. I do have, and I've talked to this before, I do have a very airy-fairy leaning to myself, but I also do my best to research and study science because it helps to ground me. But yes, so my point is that I do understand those things, but I also don't take away the significance of the power of inspiration in working with the numbers and things like that. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And inspiration is incredibly important in how we deal with things because it gives us confidence. But let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Why would you limit yourself to a system that only provides you with inspiration a fraction amount of the time?
That's a good question, but I, however, don't. Maybe a lot of other people do, because there's a lot of people who rely only on astrology, only on numerology, or only so on and so forth. I use things like reading and martial arts and my music and various other things, the sun coming out in the morning, the trees, birds, pretty girls as inspiration. So I definitely don't limit myself. I do know that a lot of people do, but that's a very good question. I don't know why people would limit themselves, but it's also probably because you gotta get people, you gotta approach people where they are. A lot of people don't have the varied experiences that I have. A lot of people don't have my parents were very encouraging to me. I've had the privilege of having really great parents who didn't ever put me down. They never called me names. They never told me I couldn't do anything. My mom used a lot of isms and metaphors and things like that, and I even put those into a pattern where I put them in an order where she always used to say, everything happens to a reason, for a reason. Do what you love and the money will follow. There's always room for improvement. And my favorite one she always used to say is, what do you mean can't? So my mother was very inspiring to me, and she worked very hard, and I watched my dad read books a lot and things like that. So I gather inspiration from many, many different places. But the question you asked is a good one, and it's, why would you limit yourself to getting inspiration from one system like numerology? Right. It's a good question.
So let me push you one further, if I may.
Yeah.
This is your talk, so I don't want to totally just derail what your planned discussion was. So let me start with a quick story, if you'll allow.
Well, no. First, I want to while you tell that before you tell that story, I want to say that this is actually a perfect talk here because of you lending your balance to it, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. So I definitely appreciate you coming up and doing this. So thank you.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you for allowing me to do that. Not everybody is so open-minded to that on both sides, on the science side and on the metaphysical side. So here's the story, and this is a true story. There is research done where they found a bunch of children who enjoyed drawing on their own. Every day, that was the thing that they did. They would take their crayons and they would take their pencil, and they would draw pictures. And it doesn't matter how good they were. What mattered is that they drew enjoyment from it, right? And so they took half of them, and one half they let continue every day to just draw on their own as they wanted to. And on the other half, they started at the end of the day, when they were done with their drawings, they would give them gold stars. And they say, good job. Good job for that drawing. You did great. Here's your gold star. And they did that for a number of months. And then after a couple of months, they stopped giving those gold stars. Now, the control group that never had anything changed continued to enjoy drawing, and they just kept on drawing and drawing every day. But the group that they gave gold stars to, the vast majority of them stopped drawing. And the reason for this is because they were able to transfer their sense of value from intrinsic within themselves to external, from something else. And when you took away that external validation, they no longer drew inspiration and enjoyment from the activity that they were doing. So I say that because when you tell me about these things that you draw inspiration from, every single thing that you mentioned was external. And there are tools and developmental things that you can do. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't mean to mitigate the challenges behind it. It's not easy. It's not a switch that you can flip. But when you take those tools and you practice them to remember how to draw your value and your inspiration intrinsically from yourself, you have that power every single day, no matter what else is going around behind you. It doesn't matter if it's a sunny day or a rainy day. It doesn't matter if numerology or astrology says you're going to have a good day or a bad day. You are able to pull that from yourself. And it means your ability and your percentage chance of being successful in your life multiplies a billionfold because you are drawing inspiration from within you, not something external.
So intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation or drive, or what would you call it? Would you call it inspiration, motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic? Because I've heard
intrinsic,
this before.
Intrinsic versus, I don't know if extrinsic is a word. It might be. I don't know that one. I just call it external. But intrinsic, is internal. You're drawing from within. And it's something we all have the capability of doing, but through society, through environment and upbringing, we get trained essentially to draw our value and our inspiration from external sources. It doesn't mean that you can't appreciate a beautiful sunset or the magic of a truly coincidental experience. It just means that you're still capable of being successful and succeeding and trying and living your life when those things aren't present.
I have one more interesting story,
Okay.
but I'll make this one really quick. A friend of mine was in a hospital, and I would visit her every day, and it was very heavily weighing on my emotions. And I remember she's a Buddhist, and she follows Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist who I've been to one of his monasteries in Oceanside, California, called Deer Park Monastery. He's got one called Plum Village in France. And one of the things that I remember her talking about was happiness is within, right? So intrinsic. And I remember that I was having a difficult time having to visit her in the psychiatric ward all the time, every day for like 3 months straight. And I started doing all this work on myself because I wasn't feeling good, I wasn't feeling happy, and nothing in my environment was telling me I should be. I was about to lose my apartment, I was about to lose my job, I didn't have any money, I was barely eating. And so I was thinking about this happiness within, and I finally was able to, through my own internal motivation, and just because I wanted to be, I was tired of being upset, I was tired of being sad, I was tired of being worn down, and I actually truly felt joy, I truly felt happiness. And then I got on the elevator to go visit her, and as the elevator doors were closing, right there, carved in wood, in this little panel, were the words "happiness is within." And so, you know, I have these experiences that happen to me over and over again, not looking for patterns or finding things, but why didn't I see it before, when I've known about this saying that she told me for years before, but I only noticed it when I finally felt happy and joyful. And I look, and it was there every day, getting on the same elevator for 3 months. And all of a sudden I notice happiness is within. So I do understand a little bit about the intrinsic motivation, but there was something about that, about me doing that, then I was able to actually just notice, hey, it's written there. It's actually carved, not in stone, but in wood. And I just think things like that are fascinating.
They are fascinating, and it goes into play about how we communicate science and the problems that we face, right? Because at the end of the day, all of those personal stories that you have experienced for yourself are going to be much stronger for you than all of the data in the world that says it's right or wrong. And that's why when we communicate with each other, you're not moved by numbers on a piece of paper that say, this is how many people die of cancer. This is how many children don't have food. What you are motivated by is that picture of that singular child telling their independent story. That is what moves human beings. That is what connects with us. That is what sticks. So that is, honestly, when it comes to science communication, that is the hardest job that we have, because you can have a singular experience, and all that means in science, whatever your experience is that is one possibility of what happens. It doesn't mean that it's the common experience. It doesn't mean that it's the uncommon. It just means that that is a thing that can happen. But on an individual level, we have a personal bias that says in our brains that we're unconscious of, and even if you are aware of it, it's still hard to fight, that says our experiences are what everybody experiences. They're the normal, and anybody that experiences something outside of that is different and less likely. And that's how we approach life as human beings. And that's really hard to fight. So
what you're saying then is that because you have this data and you want to be able to communicate it as a scientist, that there are certain things that you'll communicate, like you said, about the numbers of how many children are starving in the world. That's not going to influence people to act as much as a commercial on TV that shows a child with flies buzzing around them and with a name that you can send money specifically to.
Exactly. And you know that's true because when you watch a commercial that wants you to donate money to something, do you see numbers on the screen? Maybe down in the bottom, maybe briefly, but the vast majority of it is an emotional pull.
Sad music, sad looking child.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's the truth of it. We are story-driven individuals. We are moved by stories. And more importantly, we're moved by stories. If you want to convince me to support you, then get me to relate to you. Find some sort of common ground in which you can relate, you can sympathize, or even better, if you can empathize, right?
You know,
that's how you move people.
You know, something about that moved me to really start studying more about science, especially physics, was I noticed that a lot of the physics books that I read, even the ones that where you can find on the bookshelves of Barnes & Noble, for example, they all followed a similar pattern. They had stories, and they told stories of these scientists, and they told the stories of these scientists through time. They were all in the same order because they put them in the order of how the discoveries were, right? They go all the way back to before Newton, and they go to when the first telescopes, and when, you know, these guys were put on inquisition for saying that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and that you know, the Earth actually goes around the sun, and so on and so forth, with Copernicus and all these guys like that. And the stories about them, like specifically I remember one about Isaac Newton, how he tried to burn down his parents' house with them in it while they were sleeping. Like it's these kind of things that got me interested. Like, man, these dudes are really fucking crazy.
Yeah. And that's the truth. When you look at it, if you were to buy a physics book made for physicists, what you get is a book full of formulas, proofs, like example problems. That's a physics book for physicists. Right. When you buy a physics book for non-physicists, what you get is a narrative with simplistic. There might be some formulas and some pretty pictures in there to show whatever. Right. And that's because that's what most people are moved by and interested in. Most people don't want to sit down there and do mathematics and solve formulas to learn about a concept. They just want to know the story of it. And intermixed in there, you get stories about this. Like, here's the funny story about what happened to this scientist when he went through here, or how this relates, or whatever the narrative of it. Right. And that's how you teach things to most people, because that's what resonates.
There's a really good documentary from PBS called The Elegant Universe, featuring the theoretical physicist Brian Greene. who delved very deeply into string theory, and that's also
very big in string theory.
Yeah, that also is very good for, you know, the non-scientists, because it tells stories throughout history, and, you know, it talks about Abdus Salam and forget what the other guy's name was. The guys who in 1972 unified the weak nuclear force with electromagnetism, and I think the strong nuclear force as well. They called it the electro-weak force.
Right.
So, and there were just really great stories in there that helped me to learn more of that information, because it was relatable. Like, one of the guys was like, yeah, I did this and that equation and so on and so forth, and then I found out that it failed, and he's like, well, I went home and got drunk. You know, it's like a lot of people can relate to that. You know, a lot of people can relate to, you know, failing or having a temporary setback and doing something toxic to themselves, like going out and getting drunk or partying or whatever they do. And so yeah, I can appreciate that viewpoint, because it also is very important that people are moved by stories more than they are by equations.
It is. And interestingly enough, so I can't remember if I've told you about it, but this is the latest person that I've been reading a lot of, who I am absolutely, I am fanboying over.
Is it Just
and his name is Adam Grant, yeah. And he's not a physicist. He's what is it called? An occupational psychologist.
Uh-huh.
And he tells a story about how he's transitioned over the years of how he tries to convince people to do things that better themselves. And it really started from one time he had a former student that was trying to talk to him about the pros and cons of going to grad school for an MBA. And if you're familiar at all with that world, the MBA, you have people with very strong opinions on whether or not it's worthwhile or not.
Yeah.
But in his approach of attempting to convince her of one way or the other, she stopped and she said, you know what? You're a logic bully. And at first, for those of us who are more analytical, logic bully almost sounds like a compliment, but it's not. And the fact is that most people are not moved by logic and numbers. Most people have come to their opinions not because they've logicked themselves into it, but because they've told themselves a story into it, which means they're not going to be logic out of it. So when you start quoting facts and throwing this logical information at people, a lot of people shut down. And that's something that I've had to learn as a science communicator, that you have to know your audience. I know with you, I can come in and I can give you some logic and you're going to appreciate it and you're going to think about it. You might not necessarily always agree or change your mind, but you're not scared of it. It doesn't push you off and close you off. But there are a lot of people that when you approach them that way, they do. And that's the biggest problem when talking to anybody that it believes in more of the metaphysical stuff.
Right.
You can't talk science to people who are metaphysical because they believe that their stuff is beyond science.
Well, you did mention that before with Adam Grant, because I wrote down the name of the book, Just Ask, right? Is the name of it? I think. Is that the name of the book, Just Ask?
I think it's Rethinking or Think Again.
Oh, Think Again. Yeah, something like that. I wrote it down. I have it because I wanted to go get the book. But yes, you did mention that. And to that point as well, about the not being able to convince people with logic and having to know your audience, that's also part of, I don't always think about it consciously, but that's also part of my approach when I talk about a lot of things metaphysical and numbers, because I've fortunately been able to balance out my own understanding of the world by being so focused on science and learning and understanding what's going on in the scientific world. I can be moved by science, but even like, for example, you telling me what about how people see patterns and how stories move people. Like, these things I understand and know, but I've come to take that, like, to say, yes, I get that and I understand it. I still have an audience that needs these stories and needs these inspirations and will not succumb to logic in any way, shape, or form. Because I noticed that, for example, my best performing talks and downloads that I get from my podcast are when I'm talking about stories from my personal life and all these things that seemingly weird happen to me. But when I read neuroscience news, or I go to Tech Briefs Media, or go to even NASA's website, it's kind of like there's crickets, so they don't perform as well. And part of it is because maybe some people don't have the vocabulary for it, or it just sounds boring to them when they're hearing a story about a company that created a certain technology and it's doing this and that and all the different numbers and whatnot. But I think that's actually one of the draws of Neuroscience News, is that it's written by scientists, but it's in a narrative form where they tell stories and they give personalities and things like that. So it's a little bit more easily digestible to people. And also, when I read Neuroscience News, I give my own commentary, because some of the things that they say are absurd. But
sure, and you have to, because otherwise it's incredibly dry and dense. I was actually doing kind of a test run, so I don't know if you caught it, but I did a talk where I was essentially reading a NASA book. So because it's a book published by NASA, it's in the public domain, so I can read it verbatim without issue.
Right.
And I tried reading it just mostly straight from, with a little bit, and kind of solicited some feedback. And what I got is that everybody's like, you really need to get your insights more on this, because that's the part that was interesting. Nobody wants to hear verbatim reading. And in all honesty, even scientists have a hard time just reading verbatim data, right? Because scientists are human too. And they like to be entertained and they like to relate to things. So I would like to think, I don't know, but I'd like to think that the reason why I've been doing so well on this platform is because I've got a decade's worth of experience in communicating science through stories. I give facts, I give logic, but I'm not just reading data. I'm not just sending numbers. I'm not just saying you're wrong because science. I'm having a conversation, and I think that people appreciate that.
Also, you mentioned before the last time we talked about the author Adam Grant, about how there are a lot of people who are in high positions in science, who have medical degrees, who have PhDs, who even so, they believe in things like, I don't know what you mentioned about somebody, but, like scrying or something like that, or they're really, really very much into, thinking that, it was about the, because I laughed about Jenny McCarthy and the vaccines causing autism, and just how there are scientists who will get behind a lot of the stuff, and it's like, but wait a minute, didn't you go to medical school to study this very specific thing? Like, how is it that you're saying you're spreading this out to people? And I don't know. It's like, why do you think that someone who has a degree like that, like maybe even someone who has the same degree as you, would then also turn around and try to convince people of something otherwise? You think it's also because they're swayed by the narratives and the stories that are told?
Yeah. Because people are people. That's really what it is. People are people. And no matter what you believe, no matter how crazy it is, I promise you that you can find somebody with certificates, licensures, degrees in that field who should know better, who will agree with you. And that's a problem. And it's a problem on people who are pro-science. It's a problem on people who are anti-science. You do not believe somebody because they hold a degree. You do not believe somebody because they hold a title. You believe somebody because what they say is in alignment with what the data says.
But
right? And that's a very strong thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but that's the whole thing behind the Stanley Milgram experiment, is the whole it's what we call in clinical hypnosis the one of the primary hypnotic modalities. People listened to Stanley Milgram when he said, no, it's okay to shock these people to death, because he was wearing a white lab coat and he had the title of doctor.
Right, because he was an authority.
Right. So, yeah.
That is 100% right. And that's the problem that we have, because, like I said, both sides suffer from this. So when you have people that are not scientists but believe in science, I say this all the time. Like here in the United States, we have politicized science, and in general, as just kind of a characterization or stereotype, people on the right who are conservative or Republicans have a sort of an anti-science, I guess, reputation, and people on the left have a pro-science reputation. But when you look at their arguments, they both make the same errors. A lot of people who are on the left are right accidentally because they happen to back a person that they trust who also happens to be right, not because they're intrinsically right or because they have any actual understanding of the information that they're propagating. It's an accident, and they're making the same logical fallacies, the same biases that everybody else is making, but somebody has to be right, and in this particular case, it's them sometimes.
So in the three hypnotic modalities, the first one is authority and one-upsmanship, which we're talking about here. The second one is closely related because it's called translogic, paradigm, and doctrine. And so translogic is like transitory logic, something that's like, oh, that seems to make sense really, really quickly. Paradigm is sort of like a zeitgeist thing that a lot of people believe, or that at least it's in an organized form. And a doctrine, of course, is something like a Bible or a book. And then the third one is an internal feeling, which goes back to the narrative, when you can get people to feel something emotionally, like in those commercials where the kids are starving and the sad music, as opposed to the numbers and statistics. And so these are things that we recognize in that subset of psychology called clinical hypnosis, that people are very influenced by these things. And so the reason why it's taught to us is so that we know what to look at, and also we know how to approach people where they are, and to be able to help to inspire them or motivate them. The school's called the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, to be able to change their behavior to more favorable ones that will help them out with the things that they want to achieve in their life.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I it's interesting that the concepts that and the things that you're speaking about, I've known about them. We just have sometimes, some of them have different names and different labels on them, but it's the same idea and the same understanding. And I tend to get very excited about a lot of the metaphysical stuff because I see how my main point of entry here has been, and it's been changing over the years because of my fascination with science. It's more leaning towards the fact that I understand mostly that my position, the things that I do, is really inspiring and motivating people to do things regardless of where they get that inspiration from, as long as it makes their lives better. You know, one of the things that we learned in hypnosis is that no matter what religion a person is, they come into the clinic to do hypnotherapy to stop smoking or to perform better at their sport or whatever. If they have a certain religion or whatever, it's like we have to listen to them, and then we speak to them in their language, approach them where they are, so that they can receive the information better. Because if we start saying, well, no, your religion doesn't matter, or that's not true about this or that, then they're going to walk out, and we're not going to be able to reach that person. And so a lot of it I've come to understand is that even for myself, a lot is I've said this before too on some of my talks about the angel numbers. I don't know which one of my talks was because I do so many of them, but I said, you know what, this angel numbers book should just be read, like you can just open it up to any page and it'll say something positive to you. So I said, if you get nothing else out of this talk, just know that you can read a message and it will help to inspire you. And I've been doing that. I just open up the book and it says this or that. I'm like, okay, maybe I should do that today, you know. And just like how people would read the Bible for inspiration or get a certain passage that would help them get through a difficult time. And I think that in general, that's the approach that I'm starting to perfect myself, is that what I'm working on doing is, in a way, like that's why I also put, and actually, I don't know if you noticed this, but I actually put it in my my title because of you. Since I first met you, I can't remember when it was, when you first came on here and we had a first talk for like 2 hours. But I changed my one of my titles in my profile to science fiction communicator, because you're a science communicator. So I was like, I'm a science fiction communicator, and I use science fiction to communicate ideas. I spelled it with a K, with two Ks, but I labeled myself as a science fiction communicator because I realized that a lot of the things that I experience, as wild as they are, and maybe they're patterns that I'm seeing and whatever, I'm willing to accept that. But I'm also willing to accept the fact that by me telling these stories, a lot of people are inspired and they make changes in their lives because of it. So, but I'm very careful to say, look, I'm a science fiction communicator. I'm talking to you. Yes. This may very well be science fiction, but hey, if it helps you, then I'm glad to have that you've heard what I've had to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've got to get going here in just a second, but I did just want to say one thing because I think it's important. I think that there's value in these things. If you are utilizing these things that we call metaphysics, or I may sometimes refer to as pseudoscience, in a way that benefits you, brings joy to you, increases value in your life, then by all means keep doing it. I don't run around on this app and jump on everybody's feed when they're talking about astrophysics, or astrology or some other thing, and start yelling at them and telling them wrong. I bypass most of them. Sometimes I listen and just see what they're saying. I jump on yours because we have good communication and we have good conversations. Where I have the problem, where I draw the line, is when those things move from providing value to you to being a danger to somebody else.
Yes.
When it has to do with mental health, when it has to do with physical health, right? That's when I draw the line, and that's when I speak up. Because when you're communicating something that might work for you and have value to you, but is preventing somebody else from getting actual help that will definitely help them, like people who put off medical science that is proven to be good for whatever they're dealing with, and then instead they're rubbing a crystal on them, and then they die, because that's what happens.
Yeah.
That is what happens 100% of the time. When it doesn't happen, it's because it's within line of a placebo, right? There's a certain number of people that if you don't do anything, you're going to get better.
Right.
And that's how we test the validation of whether or not things work. If the percentage of people getting better is higher than that, then it's effective. If it's the same as that, we call it a placebo effect. Right. If it's lower than that, then it's detrimental. Yeah. And like I said, that's where I draw the line for people. So I just wanted to leave with that. Like, I'm not against people doing things that enrich their own lives. I like to answer questions. I like to have conversations. I'm never going to jump in on anybody and tell them you're wrong, don't do this, unless you are putting somebody's life in danger.
Christopher Birkenbein. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not like he needs any more followers, but please follow Christopher. He's awesome. He always brings value to the conversations. I'm so glad, Chris. Thank you for coming up here and joining me and speaking. You're always welcome at any time, no matter what I'm talking about. You're welcome to come through, and I definitely appreciate you. So I know you got some things to do. Once again, I thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, and I'm sure I'll catch you on here again.
Yes,
have a good night.
All right, you too. Have a good night. Wow. I always love it when I get to talk to him. I'm definitely a fanboy of scientists, and it's always been very, very... I get kind of giddy, and I'm always glad when Christopher comes up and talks to me. I'm actually just honored that he does take the time to come up here and talk to me. And I think one of the reasons is, what he mentioned is that I'm open to hearing what he has to say, especially because this is what he does as a profession. He's a scientist, and I am very much a proponent of science, as well as what it could be called metaphysical science, or at least that's what it's called in the school that I'm getting a degree in metaphysical sciences from. And there were a lot of good points that he made, things that I already understand, and he kind of lifted the veil off of that. You can go back into many of my talks when I'm speaking about things, and you'll hear me use words like confirmation bias. And I even say, yeah, this may very well be confirmation bias, and the numbers, this and that, and I talk about how humans were very good at seeing patterns. A lot of the stuff that he said, I speak about it very clearly, because I'm open to the idea that this very well may be what's going on. What I'm also aware of is that a lot of these tools and things that I use have inspired me, and they keep me moving on, and they help me to get through a lot of things as well. And that's what myself and a lot of people require sometimes in our lives. And he also made a good point about extrinsic versus external motivation, which is also very important. And the fact that I'm able to, without anything outside of myself, get up and do the things that I'm able to do to motivate myself to go and make things happen. And that's a very important thing for us to realize too, because all of the things that I mentioned were external, like the sunrise, like a pretty face, and so on and so forth, the numbers and things that are outside, the dates and things like that. But one of the points that I'd like to emphasize that he made was about the external versus intrinsic motivation, and that many of us would probably do well to focus on more of the intrinsic motivation, to find out what those things are that motivate us to do what we need to do in life without having to look for some external motivating factor for that. Like, many people, for example, I like the word petition, and the words petition and repetition. People petition to God, for example. Petition is like asking, right? Whereas repetition is doing it again and again. And repetition is one of the laws of hypnosis. It's repetition and association. And And one of the things that we should find more strength in is, instead of looking at the petitioning something outside of ourselves, is repeating more encouragement to ourselves without having to look outside. That we can make up our own mantras, our own prayers. We can psych ourselves up, but we have to do it over and over and over again. Like I often say that I like to repeat what Jim Rohn said in one of his talks that I heard years ago called Building Your Network Marketing Business with Jim Rohn. He says, don't wish for things to get easier, wish for you to get better. And the way I can relate that to you in a physical sense is just as a personal trainer, a fitness trainer, is, you can pick up a 50-pound weight one day, or try to, and it'll seem difficult. But the more you do it intelligently, and you exercise with caution, and you exercise carefully, all of a sudden you're lifting that 50-pound weight up better and easier than you were before. But is it really easier? No, because gravity is not lessening, and the weight, the mass of that object that you're lifting, that weight is not getting any less. You're getting stronger. And so that is what we're really looking at as far as like external versus internal motivation, is like we need to work on getting stronger. And so when I talk about things like materializing metaphysical money, it's pointing out things on the outside that you can use as a roadmap. But ultimately, it's you that has to make the decision to do these things. Like when I went to the group fitness manager and asked her for a raise, it was because I thought that it was a more favorable time for me to do that based on the numbers. But over the years, I've come to realize that by me just taking the initiative to do things on my own without anybody else telling me to do it, even when people are telling me not to do it, when I go based on what's inside of me and what I know and feel is right, and I go by my own motivation because of my own needs and desires, that's when things get done. Like my sister, she told me over and over again, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to ride your bike all the way 20 miles to this place just for this little bit of money, and security is dangerous and blah, blah, blah. But I knew for myself that I had to get myself out of a financial situation of living in her house and so on and so forth, and I had to do these things. So internally, my intrinsic motivation made me go forward and do that, even though she and other people told me not to do it, and other people even told me I was crazy for riding 20 miles. Like, what about if it rains? What about this and that? Hey, Daryl, I see you there with the dashes. Thank you for sharing those emojis here. But that's one of the main things is I don't know if anybody really knows this, but I tend to be as balanced as I possibly can, because I am very deeply rooted in physics as well as metaphysics. And one of the things that I'm doing for my PhD in metaphysical sciences is I've kind of flipped the whole thing on its head, which has upset some people, because I took the word meta, which is the Greek that means above and beyond, right? So metaphysics is above and beyond the physical, and I turned it into an acronym. One thing that I do pride myself on is I can make an acronym out of almost anything, any word. And so I took meta and I put it in the form of the main fields of physics that are studied. So META for me, and what my PhD, my paper is on, is called Mathematical, Experimental, Theoretical, and Applied Physics. That's my metaphysics, because I feel like, this is my personal opinion about it, and from my experience and also from research, that I feel like that a lot of people would do well to know the basics of physics. And I say physics, but I'm talking about science in general, that you cannot really start to talk about. Because a lot of people say things like, for example, well, this and this and that is, science, it ends there, and they say this, but then they don't know how to explain such and such a thing. Well, I say, how do you know that when you're not even studying science? People will talk about all kinds of things that are happening and say it only belongs in the domain of the spiritual and so on and so forth. But have you heard the stuff that they're talking about in string theory? Even physicists and theoretical physicists in string theory some of them ask the question, they're like, is this a theory in science, or is it a philosophy? Right? So there are a lot of things in science itself which are under contention. The string theory is one of them, which is also sometimes called M theory. Probably some people have said because of Ed Witten turning his last name, the W upside down and turning to an M. I don't know. But I also have very strongly believed that we cannot start to say where physics ends and where metaphysics begins if you don't even have the basics understanding of science and physics in the first place. And it really isn't that difficult to understand. Like, I talked to Christopher earlier about that I go to the bookstore, and there are a lot of books that are written for lay people that will get you the basics of science to understand it. Like, for example, I can easily explain to you the core of atoms, for example. I can tell you that an electron is what orbits them, so to speak, right? We call it orbiting an atom, but that within an atom, the nucleus of it is there are protons and neutrons. And in a proton, you have things called quarks. And in a neutron, you also have quarks. But in a proton, the reason why it has its positive charge is because it has 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. And the up quark has 2/3 positive charge. And there's 2 of them, remember. And 1 down quark, which has a negative 1/3 charge. So if you add 2/3 and 2/3, you get 4/3. And then you take that 1/3 of the down quark, you take away 1/3, and you have 3/3, which is 1 positive. And the reason why the neutron is neutral is because it has 2 down quarks and 1 up quark. So if you have 2 down quarks with the value of negative 1/3, negative 1/3 and negative 1/3 is negative 2/3, and you add the 1 up quark that has positive 2/3 to it, you have it being neutralized. And then that's what makes up the nucleus of the atoms, and so on and so forth. So there are things that you can find, and I just said that in like less than a minute, right? You can understand some of the very basics, even if you're not talking about the math. I mean, I did some basic math, but that was just basic fractions, right? And integers. But those are things that you can come to understand yourself, and even more and greater things if you just take a little time to go to the bookstore, or if you don't have money for that, go to the library, or even watch some of those documentaries like PBS. I mean, it's on CD for example. I mean, DVD, for example, where you can download the video somewhere. Actually, The Elegant Universe is on YouTube, featuring Brian Greene, and you will learn so much from watching that. Like, you know, there are endless things that I repeat to people that I've learned from that documentary, that I've learned from other books that I have. And there's some other books that are more dry. Like one of my favorite authors wrote a book called Mastering Technical Mathematics and Teach Yourself Electricity and Electronics. You know, just the way that he structures the books, you can start to get an entry-level understanding of what some of the physics and the science are behind that. So whether or not you are more metaphysically leaning or spiritual or religious, or you're more interested in science, I would suggest that you balance out your perspective in a similar way that I do, by reading anything and everything that interests you. You know, one of the things that I find inspiration from are conspiracy theories, because when I hear some of the wild conspiracy theories out there, it causes me to want to go and dive into the science behind it to find out if there's any merit to it or not. And the things that happen when I go on these wild goose chases of looking up to see if there's any truth to this, or to debunk some of these things, I find out even more and more and more about the world around me. And yes, Christopher is right about me and a lot of other people. No matter what he says, I'm still going to go along the path that I am, looking at these numbers and drawing inspiration from the angels. At the same time, I do know that a lot of it has to do with confirmation bias, the fact that we humans see patterns in things, and that we follow more narratives than we do data. And there's nothing, well, actually, I'm going to phrase it this way. There's everything okay with that, as long as you keep an open mind. As long as you keep an open mind. Because these things that I'm doing, I don't know. Is it because of the angel numbers and numerology and all these things that my life continues to skyrocket on an upward path? Or is it because of something intrinsic in me that I have been trained, because my parents always encouraged me and told me that I could be the best that I can be, and no matter what situation I go into, I'm always well received for the most part, unless I act like a jerk, right? So what is it about that? What are we doing? And how can we draw inspiration? How can we continue to move further upwards and onwards? So I actually did get to tell all of the stories that I was going to use as a pattern to convince you, if you will, to start looking at the numbers to materialize metaphysical money. But I'll make a quick recap. There were a whole bunch of 8s that popped up when I asked for a raise, and I got an $8 raise, right? And it was like, my birthday added up to 8. The year 2006 added up to 8. It was in the 8th month on a personal 8th day. Then I went into a personal 8th year. And then on the 8th day of 2008, when my friend's birthday added up to 8, and I got an $8 raise. Like, so things like that are just baffling to me sometimes to see that those things happen. And then with these numbers popping up, like the bartender walking out of Central 111 and then looking at the clock with my friend Sarah and it being 111 on the clock when he's standing under a sign that says 111 and all the lights just blinked out in this entire shopping center. Or how I left my wallet for 5 hours at a public gas station and went back and it was sitting on top of there untouched when people had been going there and getting gasoline, and I got in the car and started talking to Sarita Issa on Wisdom here and it was 2:22, and the next day a girl asked me about my first date with my girlfriend and I told her about the books and she said, what was the last book I read? And then she says angel numbers and she pulls up her sleeve and has 222 on it. Those things are quite fascinating. And regardless of whether they come from confirmation bias or we're seeing patterns and things like that or not, they are very inspiring, they are motivating, and they make life more exciting. And I think that if we can make life more exciting in some ways, that we will begin to start materializing metaphysical money, whether it's because of the attitudes and the energy that we put out, and we become more boisterous, we become more confident, and we ask for that raise, and we start that new business, or we ask for that promotion, or we approach the people that we normally wouldn't approach. Whatever it is that you need, whether you draw your inspiration from God, the devil, numerology, astrology, or from science itself, or a combination of all those like I do, whatever it is that you need to do to make your life better, go there and do that. You've been listening to Materializing Metaphysical Money, presented by Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander here on the Wisdom app, Social Audio Inc., and Spreaker, social podcasting, presented for Wisdom Top Mentor interviews on Spreaker, in association with a Unique Equilibrium. Thank you guys for the emojis. I see you there, Cecilia Grace and Daryl with the Dashes. I appreciate you all. Sonia Sundara, Sparkly Queen, Amir Ali, Mojo, Marcy Ann, Michael J, John Bush, Cosmic J, Christopher Birkenbein, thank you for being my guest and coming up here. Dr. Tim Stafford, Indubitably Duality, and Doobie, what's up, brother? Lindsay May McKay, Melissa Bowling, Janelle, Brent Manuel, Daniel Nieto, Chocolate Yoda, what's up? Sean, GTR Harold, Daily Shift, Goddess Zuri, I like that name, Zuri, Ali, Tyra Jones, Salty Coffee, Alyssa, Niesha, and Dr. Rao. This is always great, and I love it whenever you guys stick around and listen, and I will be back soon with some other supervillain wackiness. Thank you, Mojo. Appreciate you all. Until next time, y'all have a wonderful evening. Stay well.